Hello and welcome to the RPG Blender. We give lesser played games and forgotten settings the roll the dice they deserve. I am your host, Game Master George, and today we're going to be taking a look at a Kickstarter project for a Diceless RPG Enclave. It's a tableless role-playing game. As you may remember, we released a short review of this game about a week ago. This video will now be an expansion of the ideas that I talked about in that quick review. This is not going to be a tutorial, this is just going to be me giving my thoughts on this game and whether I would back it or not. Last thing before we dive in, yes, I was provided a review copy of this early look at the game. This is not a sponsored video, I have no connection to the creators of this game whatsoever. Aside from them emailing me to see if I wanted to take a look at their game. My answer is always yes. And if you think that you would like to take a look at this game too, you can find a link to their Kickstarter in the description. Now, let's get started. The first thing to talk about is the setting. In Enclave, you play as globe-trotting, well, it might not actually be a globe, we'll get to that in a minute, but globe-trotting sounds better than just world walking. You play as globe-trotting agents of the Enclave, taking jobs from anybody across the world. They will take on any task from the largest to the smallest, if the payment can meet their demands. And their demands are not always monetary. Instead, the Enclave takes payment in things that further their goals. Money, yes. Favors, influence. Maybe that random bauble that you found on the street is actually part of something extremely important and they need it. Whatever your request is, if you have something that the Enclave wants, they'll make a deal with you. These missions are carried out in the world of Manifold. And that's about all I can tell you. Most of the definition of Manifold is left to the imagination of the game master and the players. It can be any tech level. There are no set nations, although it is mostly human, unless you don't want it to be. Anyway, the Enclave is sending out their agents on these missions, which may not be altruistic. In fact, one of the components of the setting is that agents may refuse a mission, objecting to its morality if they choose. But the implication here is that the Enclave may not actually be a force for good. So the question becomes, what is this larger goal that drives the Enclave's missions? What is it they hope to achieve? And how does the payment for this mission further their goals? The opportunities for storytelling are vast within the confines of an Enclave agent, but the lack of definitions for Manifold does hurt the setting. It's great for an experienced game master or someone with their own story to tell, but is not very helpful for someone looking for inspiration. This is why I give the setting a 4 out of 5. There is a lot of potential in the mystery of the Enclave, but the lack of definition of the world of Manifold hurts the accessibility of this system. Next up, let's talk a bit about the mechanics of the game. This is a diceless system, which means there is no randomization at all. The results of any particular action is determined by the game master. This takes the form of prompt and response gameplay. The game master presents a prompt, whatever problem is at hand that the players need to solve. The players will then inquire into the setting. If they get stuck, they may be able to get hints through the use of some of their statistics. Or if they're feeling like they really need a little boost, they could try to use their luck or mastery of the arcane to find just the item that they need or manifest some kind of benefit. The response is the action that the players are taking, and this is not limited by in-game mechanics. What limits your actions instead is the application of logic. In a normal tabletop game, both the players and the game master fall back on mechanics. But here, what mechanics there are loose. It is all about relative power. Every character has 12 statistics, and in that statistic, you do not have a number. There are numbers in this game. What are you talking about? Come on. Instead, you get pluses to that statistic, and the amount of bonuses or pluses, bonuses is much easier to say, so that's what I'm going to say from here on out. The amount of bonuses that you have relative to the difficulty of the task should color whether you succeed or not. This creates a very free-form, narrative-first style of gameplay. You are not restricted by a list of abilities that your character possesses, nor even trying to force your actions into the confines of the moves of Apocalypse World. You are truly free to describe whatever you think your character could feasibly accomplish. Now, listening to this, there are probably two frames of mind that you might have. The first is,
this sounds wonderful! This is an opportunity to break free of restrictive mechanics and to truly role-play your character.
And the other half of you are probably like,
Well, where's the game in this? This is just sitting around writing a book.
and both of you are right. If your focus is more on the roleplay aspect of the game, then these mechanics are tailor-made for you. But if you desire more of a game experience, then you're not going to find anything to sink your teeth into here. There are some additional things that you can throw in, like pitches, where players can, as mentioned, use their luck or arcane ability to twist the narrative slightly. But again, this comes down to GM adjudication, as the GM is able to reject these pitches. If you have a good level of trust with your game master and a desire for purely roleplay experience, then the mechanics may be a good fit for you. But if you are looking for actual gameplay, you will want to look elsewhere. And this is why I give this game a 3 for its mechanics. The mechanics that are there are solid and logically applied, but the lack of defined mechanics, opting instead for comparative results, can lead to the question of, why do I even need the book? Next up is the what should be relatively short discussion of game mastering. One of the most important things in any game is how easy it is for your game master to learn it and then run it. Because, well, they're going to be the one actually buying the game, they're going to be the ones giving the first read, and they're probably going to be the one teaching you how to play. So it is important that a game be accessible for a game master. And this game has an interesting line there. As a game master running this game, it is exceedingly rewarding. You are not bound by true crunchy mechanics, which means that you are free to envision any scenario you might desire. And when your players come up with that crazy, off-the-wall idea that makes your jaw drop in admiration, it can actually succeed. You don't need to worry about mechanics saying no. This is, as a game master, a system of full, complete freedom. But with that freedom comes a very high price tag. As mentioned before, it is very important that the players and game masters be on the same page. And you as the game master are the center of that difficulty. You are the one that needs to make sure that you are on the same page as your players. You are the one who needs to make sure that you are accurately applying logic, because you do not have mechanics to fall back on for your reasoning. You have to be willing to accept the input of your players, to adjust the scene that you have set in accordance with their interjections, and then be set to apply all of these varied influences and come out the other side with a resolution. It is a lot of pressure, especially for a newer game master. If you get your players in the right mindset, working with you to craft this tale will be an extremely rewarding experience. As long as you're not someone who enjoys crunch. If you're someone that enjoys crunch, drop this down to a 0, but for me, and for my outlook, I give this a 4. The difficulties with GMing this kind of game can't be ignored, but the rewards make the effort well worthwhile. And the last facet that I want to talk about here is, well, it goes beyond even a double-edged sword. That being the characters. When you're building your system, it is a fine line that you need to walk between giving your players enough details that they can sink their teeth into when they're creating their characters, but not overwhelming them. They need to have meaningful choices that they make during creation and during progression, but you don't want to overload them with too many upfront choices. Here, unfortunately, we have both of these problems. Your character has 12 different statistics. And as mentioned previously, we don't assign a number to these, instead we apply a bonus. So the ratings on your 12 stats can range from a 0 or base to having 3 pluses to it. With 12 different statistics, in order to max out each of them, you would need a total of 36 pluses. During creation, you get 6. 3 of those are determined by your class, with 2 of them going into just a single trait. The result is that the freeform choice for your stat application is getting to allocate 3 different pluses to your remaining 10 attributes. Unfortunately, this is indicative of stat bloat, And when we read through these attributes, we can see how you could consider some of them to have overlap. Even if you spread out the most you possibly could, you would only be able to receive bonuses in 5 of the 6 stats. That would give you 1 that's ranked at 2, 4 that are ranked at 1, and 7 with just the base. In my opinion, these stats either need to be compressed to maybe around 8 to 10 at the very most. I would shoot for 8. Or you need to increase the amount of customization that you can do in creation with these pluses. This also comes into play when we're looking at the classes. There are 6 classes. Each class gets a bonus to 2 traits. So, simple math says we have 6 classes, we have 12 traits, and we get 2 traits per class. Well, there should be a class that is giving a bonus to every trait, but that is not the case. 3 of the traits, Might, Will, and Reflex, have no class that gives a base to them, which means that if you want to specialize in one of those 3 traits, the only way to do so is to take your very limited flex bonuses. For example, if you wanted to max out Might to be the strongest there's ever been, you would need to use all 3 of your freeform bonuses. Now, looking at these classes a little bit further, you can see that they basically define everything about character creation. Not only are they giving you half of your starting traits, they're also defining all of your starting gear, the abilities that you have, and your personality. You cannot be a gunslinger and not be the cool as a cucumber type. It is literally built into the requirements of one of your abilities. And speaking of abilities, every class gets 3 of them. There's no choice about it. You just get 3 specific abilities. And then when you're actually in play, there are no real ways to expand your character. What you have at the beginning is what you will have at the end. Now that said, there are references in the book to an additional expansion which will add in leveling and more customization. And the creator themselves did comment on the previous short, noting that they did have leveling mechanics, but they took them out because they were a bit too complicated. But I do believe that that is to the detriment of the game. In my opinion, this game would be better served as a classless system. Rather than having you pick a class which defines your attributes, allowing for free-form selection of your attributes. Rather than defining 3 abilities that you get, having a list of abilities tied to prerequisite ranks in traits, then allowing players to pick 2, 3, 4, however many of them. A free-form system like this is held back by character classes. Still, I cannot give it more than a 2. The classes have some interesting abilities, focusing on these nebulous pluses and personality traits over crunch. It is not the worst character creation I've ever seen, but I would not count it as good. And that brings us to the big question. Would I back this game? On the one hand, I have some serious issues with the game as it stands right now, but that's not all that I see here. The bones are all there for this to actually develop into something much better. And even looking through the book, when they talk about the Aspirant Edition, they are detailing ways that this will be able to be improved, and those improvements would drastically improve this game. What I'm afraid of is that this game won't reach its funding, and all of the potential that I see here will never have a chance to be realized. And that would be unfortunate, that we would never get to see what it could develop into. And in truth, isn't that the core idea behind Kickstarter? The ability to get your ideas out in front of people, see if they resonate enough to actually get some financial backing, and then put out a finished product that is truly at its peak. Not just a way for you to put down a pre-order on a book without actually calling it a pre-order. This is a game with risk. It could develop into something great, or it could stay where it is and be a good example of a diceless game, which does little to truly differentiate itself. Anyway, that's it for me. I've talked long enough about this and had to re-record things too many times because of this light's battery being dead. Thank you for tuning in. To the developers, thank you for sending over the advanced copy of this. I'm sure this isn't quite what you would have wanted to hear, but I hope that you can take my constructive criticism as it's intended. In the end, it's just my opinion. I may be wrong. Anyway, thank you again, and remember, There's gaming outside the Forgotten Realms.